An Illegitimate Concern is the 18th episode of the 5th season of The Golden Girls. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts, and as is usually the case with The Golden Girls, it's a really decent episode. It starts off with Sophia asking Dorothy to be in the mother-daughter beauty pageant at Shady Pines, and Dorothy reluctantly agrees, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. Somebody then arrives at the door. We learn that this is a character called David, and he's played by Marc Moses, and he asks for George Devereaux. And of course he's not there, and he leaves very quickly, and it's a bit of a mystery. Who is he? Why does he want to be there? I will say, if you want to not know what the mystery is, don't look at IMDb before watching this episode, which if you're just binge watching on Disney Plus, or if you've got the box set, that's probably going to be how you do it. But I always pull up the IMDb page beforehand, so I'm ready for my discussion. And I did kind of read what it was about, so that did spoil it a little bit. But we do get a little bit of a mystery. And then Rose tells a story to Dorothy, that's an Olaf story, and Dorothy says, Rose, hand me the newspaper. And I have to say, to Rose's credit, she was about to, and hesitated and said, no, you're going to hit me with it. She learned. And Dorothy promised she will not hit Rose with the newspaper. So Rose hands her it, and Dorothy hands it to Blanche, and Blanche hits Rose. I don't agree with it, but it was very swiftly executed. Really, really, very well done. And we then have David arriving again, and he says, quite to the point, George Devereaux, your husband, was my father. And I will be honest, I don't think, and I can't say this because, as I said, I read the description before watching it, but I would be surprised if anybody guessed that's what he was going to say. Maybe they would because he came looking for him, but certainly I think there is an element of surprise there, and immediately Blanche told him to get out. And what I think is quite interesting about this, and maybe this is just how I'm reading it, I'd love to know if you had the same response, but Blanche, I'm not surprised she immediately told him to get out. I think that was a knee-jerk reaction. But I feel like she was not denying it. She just didn't want to hear it. And part of me thinks that even as she heard those words leave David's mouth, part of her instantly thought, yes, I knew my husband has been unfaithful. But then she went on to say that she couldn't believe he would do this. So I don't know if I'm reading it correctly, but that's just my reading. I feel like if somebody said that to me, your husband was my father, and obviously this means, given my age, he cheated on you, my initial reaction would say, you're wrong. That's not right. My initial response wouldn't be, get out. That seems like Blanche just didn't want to deal with it. So I don't know if I'm reading it the way they intended, but that's certainly how I perceived it. And Blanche is then looking through her diaries, and she found a particular entry where George had bought her some earrings after he'd been away. And it's clear that, to her, that represents his guilt. It's a common thing. People feel guilty, so they buy something for their loved one because they think material gifts will make it all better. And I feel like also because she was looking for this evidence, again, for me, that further suggests that Blanche actually maybe did believe David. She just didn't want to. So I think that that's quite interesting. And then we get a bit that I really, really wanted to put in the thumbnail for this, but the reveal is so fabulous, I didn't want to spoil it. And this is when Sophia and Dorothy come out in their Sonny and Cher costumes. It is fabulous. And then they start singing I Got You, Babe, which was just an absolute joy, and Rose playing on the piano, and I really, really loved it. And then Rose confesses to Blanche that actually she'd lied and that her husband had cheated on her as well. And we also find out that strudel was Rose and Charlie's name for sex, which is going to really affect any time I eat strudel in the future. Thankfully, it's not something I eat that frequently. In fact, I think I've maybe had strudel once in my life, maybe twice. I don't know, but it was funny, but a little bit bizarre as well. And what I love about the way the episode went is that Blanche finally realised that she was taking it out on David. It's not David's fault that her husband had an affair and then had an illegitimate son. And she ends up giving him some information about his father and showing him photographs, and it was a lovely moment. It was a really touching moment, and I think Blanche did the right thing, and I think she came to the right conclusion. There is no reason to take it out on David, and again, because I think she quite quickly accepted what George had done, part of me thinks maybe she'd suspected that once upon a time and maybe didn't want to believe it, but faced with this evidence, she did. And there is evidence, because the reason David knew is because his mother had been getting money, and the details were for George Devereaux at this address, at Blanche's address. And I don't think it would be physically possible for somebody with that name to live at that address and not be her husband. So it was very clear, very evident. And, well, I say that. I mean, he could have been a scammer for all we know, but he wasn't exactly asking her for anything. So, in general, I thought it was a great narrative, but I think there are some really great takeaways if you are the Blanche in this situation. I think it's understandable if anybody were to find out what Blanche did to have that knee-jerk reaction. I would never blame anybody for responding the way Blanche did. But ultimately, I think she came to the right decision with how to handle this situation. I think that's a strong takeaway. And we end the episode with Dorothy and Sophia coming back from Shady Pines, and they won, and they look fabulous, and I love their matching outfits, and it looks great. So absolutely no complaints. This is obviously a brilliant episode of The Golden Girls. An Illegitimate Concern is an absolute delight with some great takeaways, very funny, but certainly very thought-provoking as well, and ultimately a really brilliant episode.